What is going on, guys? The NBA betting market video for January the 13th, 2021. Fat guy, let's start off with Mavs Hornets. Mavs opened up as 4-point favorites. Still are 4-point favorites at home. 1,210 bets. 63% of the money and 75% of the bets on the Mavericks, despite the juice moving in favor of the Hornets. But that could be because the money line for the Hornets opened at plus 153. It's been bet down to plus 147. 36% of bettors on the Hornets, but 71% of the money on the Hornets money line.
To correct you, it was 63% of the bets, 75% of the money on the spread on the Mavs. And as Big Ry had mentioned, that does make a lot of sense. There is a little bit more action on the Mavs. ATS, not a little bit more, 3-1 actually. And they moved it down 2 points of juice. Conversely, I'm thinking maybe pros perhaps are preferring Hornets money line, seeing that there is value. We're going to have to do a little calculation to see if this lines up. Is 153 on the money line better than plus 4 minus 105? Only time will tell. It does look like kind of a balanced market though when you compare the two tickets. It is interesting to me though. I'd like to know, like, I really wish we had numbers on like parlay tickets on how often something like the Mavericks was added. So it would give you a good indicator. Because I mean, I bet you could just make a living, honestly, betting against things that are added to parlays the most. Wouldn't you think, Big Ryan?
Yeah, possibly. Like, the books just make so much money off of parlays, and I think that's the point we're trying to get to, is that like parlays and teasers, the books just print money. And single game sports betting, they still make a win, but just not as drastic as they do. I think, what was it, like the worst year they had on parlays in Las Vegas books was like something in the mid 20s.
Something in the mid to low 20s. It might have been 18%, but they average around 28% roughly over the last 30 years. In single game betting, they had 5 losing years in baseball. In single game betting, just to give you, baseball has the lowest juice, the lowest hold. So what does that tell you? Paying juice is bad, right? And then even in NFL betting and NBA betting, like against the spread, single game betting, they really only make like, sometimes some good years will happen. They'll have like a 10, 11, 9% year, but their ROI is like 5, right? So just think about this. Like, I'm not saying you couldn't ever beat a parlay over the long term under certain circumstances. Maybe not a parlay, maybe a teaser using a Wong teaser, but that's kind of old hat. It's being phased out, and it would be a long shot for you to even find places that accept Wong teasers. That's another video for another day. Long story short, it is bad to bet parlays, and mostly the squarest of square action is on it. That's why I'm saying it's interesting that, even if I had that information, just to see what fading the popular bets would entail, considering it attracts the squarest markets.
The OU for this game, it opened at 220. It's been bet up to 221 with juice on the over at minus 109. 42% of bettors on the over, 57% of the money on the over.
A lateral movement, nothing crazy like we saw in a couple of the games yesterday. 221, it just moved. And don't forget, the juice is on the over as well, right? So this money does hold a little bit. 1,210 bets. That's something that's interesting to me, though. The volume here on the first game is a little more than I would have thought for a Mavericks Hornets game, but interesting nonetheless.
Next up, we have the Bucks Pistons. Bucks opened up as 10-point favorites. They've been bet up to 10.5-point favorites. Juice at minus 111. 56% of bettors on the Bucks, 87% of the money on the Bucks against the spread to win large on the road. For the money line, though, the line hasn't moved that much since it opened. Minus 547 up to minus 549. 73% of bettors are on the Bucks, but there's a huge amount, 85% of the money on the Pistons money line, anywhere in the plus 436, 437 range.
Okay, my guess here is that pros are on Pistons money line. I got to be honest, and Bucks or Joes are probably on Bucks, and some pros on Bucks minus 10.5 here. Because look, this is a lateral movement. No, 10 minus 105 to minus 10 minus 111, 87% of the money. That makes sense, right? Now Pistons, they're taking exposure here because 85% of the money, but you're gonna have to pay out plus 437. Like that's a little bit of risk here. And Big Ryan and I have taken a cursory glance at at money line to spread, and we don't know yet for sure, but this is starting to look like there is value on big dogs like this in the NBA at least. Only because like you got to remember, there's huge variance though. Like you're not going to win this Pistons bet. Like when you make a Pistons bet here, you're not expecting to win. You're just expecting to win more often than the odds being laid, right? So that's the thing. Like a lot of squares don't understand like the mathematics around it. When you place that Pistons bet, you're not expecting to win. I do not think the Pistons are going to win this game. However, over the long run, there is a chance that this Pistons money line isn't accurate. Like there's a chance that there could be value in that this Pistons money line could be something like plus 410. So then your expected value is 27 437s, right? So which isn't a lot, but it's a few percentage points. This is all theory. This is all gambling theory, and we're all learning together, right? So I just want to point this out here that it is a possibility that stuff like this. So it's a theory to posit, but it's a high variance one, and it's not a popular one because you're going to go betting money lines like the Pistons. You're going to have a lot of days going 0-5. A lot. And then some days you're going to go 2-3 and make boats. You know what I mean? Because you only need, 1-4 to break even here, Big Cry, on one of those type of money line bets.
Yeah, we don't have the exact math. It's something that you and I have been working on projecting, and there is never any 100% accuracy that you could predict this. But we did find some of the money lines were grossly undervalued compared to the spreads from our early numbers.
When he uses the term grossly, he means by a few percentage points.
Yeah.
There's no home run here, okay? He's saying on the good end it could be a 7%er on the good end, and on the bad end it could be a 2%er, or we're just way off and it's even. So that's kind of in the vein we're looking, but again, none of this is concrete, none of this is solidified, and we can't put a mark of approval on it, but it is something to think about. Start thinking about these types of ideas because you want to posit theories. You want to come up with hypotheses. You want to compare them to your data, and then you want to experiment them with the season going forward. That's just kind of how you do things. And it is supposed to be easier in the early season and difficult near the end. So there is usually ripe with opportunity. So this is where the base of most of your hypothesis should be coming from, is around this time, right? Even though we're at a third of the way through the season, oddly enough.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's a pretty short season. I think it goes till the end of February, early March. The OU for this game, it opened 227, still 227. Juice has favored the over at minus 112. 74% of bettors has helped push that up. However, they only receive 56% of the money.
Yeah. So there is a lot of people are betting overs. We're finding as well. It does. There is a lot more dollars per person on the under, but the under is being incentivized, which always makes me a little scared. But it looks like a good price. 227 at plus 102 is really nice. Plus money is always nice. Whereas minus 106 to minus 112, that's a couple percentage points of win probability there. So I mean, it is a lateral movement, but it is interesting to see though that they are incentivizing the under rather than just moving it to 228.
Next up, we have the Knicks. Nets opened as 5-point favorites. They've been bet up to 6-point favorites. 907 bets so far. 53% of bettors are on the Nets against the spread. However, 81% of the money has helped push this up. Interesting to note as well, the money line, Nets open minus 187. They've been bet up to minus 231. 60% of bettors on the Nets, but 88% of the money on the Nets. So the books are taking some exposure here on the Knicks, but the line has moved in the Nets' favor, both against the spread and on the money line.
And the juice on the spread as well, right? So this makes all sense. It's congruent. Considering there is pro love on the Nets, and I would imagine there's probably Joe love, considering the Nets have star power. Again, this is just a theory positive, nothing concrete there, but I would imagine that there probably is value on the Knicks going forward, but that's just speculation because there does seem to be a lot of Nets love, and this is an early market. 907 bets, somehow less than the earliest game, despite the Nets star power. So it is interesting to watch how the Knicks perform and what kind of buy. When more interesting though is when is like when the pros buy back on the Knicks. So that's what I'm interested in. Is when does the line move enough for the Knicks for people to go, okay, I'll take the Knicks.
Next up, we have the Lakers Thunder. Or did we talk about the OU yet?
Nope.
I don't think we have. So the OU opened at 219. It's been bet up to 220 with juice favoring the under at minus 110. 43% of bettors and 33% of the money is on the under.
This is weird. Either this market's really small and it hasn't been bet too much, or they're just doing one of those smoke screen things because, I don't think minus 104 at 219 to even money at 220 for the total is like, I still think it's a positive line movement for the over, but it's not. It's probably the smallest one I can think of though, because you're lower. The juice is even money, right? So it's you're not that incentivized. Like you're losing one push. Like you're pushing on one number that you would win on 220, right? Unless 220 is a very valuable number. Not that I think it's possible. It is possible. We have taken a look at that. So it is an interesting thing here, but it is probably lateral in all likelihood.
Next up, we'll go to Lakers Thunder. It's interesting that a Lakers game only has 491 bets.
Yes.
So this game the line might have just come out on this game. But it opened at Thunder +8 at even. It's been bet down to Thunder +7 at minus 101. Only 37% of bettors and 44% of the money on the Thunder against the spread. However, if we look at the money line, with the Thunder opening at +292 down to 259, 31% of bettors on the Thunder, but a sharp 54% of the money on the Thunder money line. So books taking they're taking quite a bit of exposure here on the Thunder, on the money line at least. But against the spread, it seems pretty even.
Yeah, but that's probably why they're incentivizing taking the Lakers, because they have exposure on the Thunder money line. The Lakers have played this would be what they played last night. I know that much, against the Houston Rockets. Maybe there is some sort of biases against the Lakers, perhaps coming off 3 games in 4 nights, that type of thing. Who knows? People do like it's called anchoring. It's where they come up with a reason that someone isn't going to do well, and then they anchor to that reason, because maybe this Thunder line was really, was a really profitable line at +8 even money and at 292 on the money line. I would imagine 292 is actually a better number than +8 even money. But people anchor to those ideas. Either that or it's just really bad, right? So, and this is interesting too, though. They move it to +7, but it's minus 101. Like, why isn't it like +7 minus 107? That's what I find troubling, a little bit interesting. So maybe there is no value play on either side, but it is interesting that the Thunder's money line carried so much weight. Onto the OU, Big Ry.
This OU is pretty interesting. So it opened at 215 with juice on the over at minus 110. It's been bet up to 218 with juice even on both sides at minus 105. However, only 29% of bettors took the under, but as of now, what it's telling us is 99% of the money has been put on the under, despite that line moving up 3 points.
I'm really confused at that. They're really incentivizing to take the under, to be honest. And I would think that the under probably positively correlates with the dog. But again, that's speculation. 215 to 218. The juice did move, but minus 105, that's palatable to me. It really is. I'm not sure if that 99% of the money is an accurate figure, but it is bizarre. Like that would be a strong, if it's even in the 80s, that would be an insanely strong reverse line movement.
Yeah,
so
one thing I'll bring up is there is only 491 bets. So This is one of the games that doesn't have a lot. So you and I are both looking at that, but taking a look at the full picture kind of makes us realize there's probably only like 100 OU bets, and it just takes one guy to put one whale to put a couple $1,000 on the under. Wow. And it's obviously
might be more than that, but
looking at this as a microcosm, as a very small market, maybe they have not a lot of respect for this bettor who placed this under bet. So it could have helped push that line up, but who knows? They just might not have taken enough action for this to really affect it.
It still doesn't make sense, though. I haven't seen him make a 3-point move. Like, I don't know. This is definitely one to watch for tomorrow and see where this number lies.
Next up, the Grizzlies T-Wolves. T-Wolves opened as 2.5-point favorites, still 2.5. Juices moved in the Grizzlies' favor just a slight bit. 70% of the bets and 71% of the money, however, has been placed on the T-Wolves despite the juice moving in the Grizzlies' favor. And that juice has probably moved in their favor because of the money line. Grizzlies open plus 133, bet down to plus 125. 56% of bettors, however, 88% of the early money on the Grizzlies with 907 bets total for this market.
Yeah, it is interesting because like these are teams that haven't done well so far. So 907 bets on the 13th and the 15th in standings as far as Western Conference. A little bit interesting. I'm just noticing, right? That's kind of like why you look at the Lakers one. Maybe the Lakers one just came out, like Big Rye had said, but and this market has been languishing for quite some time. But it is interesting to see that there's action. There's action always, you know what I mean, between bottom dwellers. But I would imagine, I really imagine that 133 is probably the best price out of anything. Grizzlies plus 133. That's why it has so much love here. I understand why the T-Wolves, why it looks like reverse line movement on minus 10 to minus 107, but it isn't when you consider the money line markets. I think I'm starting to really believe that pros are attacking money line markets more than anything because I feel like they're the dictator between the two in a lot of these scenarios. So because you can also things are multiplied too, like your risk is multiplied. Like again, ATS, it's just a number where you get a commission on both sides. You can make that argument for money line, except the dog does bite harder, does it not, Big Rye? At like even at 125, say everyone at this 88% money clip got it at 125 rather than 133, which I imagine it's more like 133. You're still going to lose like not just all of that money. You have to pay back an extra 25% on that. So, and the money that you collected on the T-Wolves isn't nearly going to cover that, right? So it's very interesting. And I think this is maybe it's a blind spot in the NBA for now. That's the problem with a lot of these theories that I'd mentioned about hypothesizing is they end up getting covered or partially covered as they go, but then they overcompensate in another area. So you got to it's a lot of homework here just to make a few percent, but that's why we do it. We love it. It is a point of intrigue. On to the OU.
OU opened at 220, bet up to 222. The juice hasn't moved off of minus 105. 58% of bettors and 49% of the money on the over.
I'm going to say that this is probably lateral because there was probably a bunch of people at 220 like the over, and then it probably got bought back on at 222 because that's a very common score for NBA games. Correct, Big Rye?
I believe so. The average is around 224, 225 this year. So pushing up from 220 to 222 is pretty much saying that this is going to be pretty close to the average total number of score.
So maybe 221 is equilibrium. Let's be honest here. It might be even that. So even though it looks like why are they moving it from 220 to 222, there's a chance that the early money bettors bet the under bet the over at 220, and then people followed with the under at 222. So that's always a possibility. So maybe 221 is a really bad result for Vegas. That's always a chance.
Next up, we have the Pelicans Clippers 1,097 bets. Clippers is the number one bet team as far as our bet analytics are concerned. And this continues here with this game, 1,097 bets early on. Clippers opened as 6-point favorites. They've been bet up to 6.5-point favorites, 61% of bettors, 76% of the money on the Clippers against the spread. And conversely, on the money line, Clippers minus 227 up to minus 274, 44% of bettors, however, 98% of the money on the Clippers money line. So they are taking exposure on the Clippers on both sides. However, at least against the spread, this line's only moved up half a point and some juice.
Yeah, they are incentivized taking the Clippers. I think that the book might be balancing, but with the book balancing, there's often sometimes there's meat on the bone because of people's overconfidence. Are the Clippers that much better than the Pelicans? Who really knows, right? Records are very comparable, but it's so early in the season, it's very hard to make that assumption based on records. Records aren't even a good way of ever going, especially in the NFL. It's a bit better in the NBA because you get more of a sample of games, but it still is something. Are the Clippers 6.5 point better than the Pelicans? I'm not sure over a long run, but it is interesting to look at. They are taking exposure as well because it's not, with Big Ryan mentioning it is the number one bet team. It does have 1,097 bets, more than the game starting at the same time of Trailblazers and Kings, and more than a lot of the earlier games, it looks like. So this falls in line with that theory that the Clippers are perhaps a very public team. And the one thing about public teams, when you put out a line, and you put out a line that's going to be bet on a lot by the Clippers, that might offer value on the Pelicans. That's just a theory that, again, we're positing because that's what we do at this juncture in the season. And betting against people's overconfidence is probably the number one strategy, I would say, for profiting.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the analysis we've done on the back end, and the Clippers are 6-5 against the spread this year, and they've received 25% more bets than the Pelicans have. But interesting to note, the Pelicans are actually only 3-6 against the spread on closing lines this year. So I'm sure good. People have the Clippers riding high in their minds and the Pelicans riding low, especially on people who are betting every day. Pelicans have probably burned them. Clippers probably made people some money. So this is one of those opportunities where there might be some value on the Pelicans with so many public bettors being on.
And that's Clippers. A nice line, Big Rye. 6.5 at plus money. Or even the one thing is, I think that's better than the 237, even though I've been hyping money lines of dogs, only because there would be some action, I believe. So on the Pelicans, not that really low figure of 2%. That is dubious, though, I will say.
I will move on to the OU market. Open 220, bet down to 218. Juice has helped push that under down at 218 minus 107. 57% of bettors and 42% of the money is on the under.
Excuse me. And that is a little bit interesting here because, I mean, you are getting more money on the over. People are tending to put more money on the over. And then you do a reverse line movement here. This one, I believe, carries a little bit more weight, considering that this is probably a really square game. Like Clippers over, like that's in the mind of the square, I think, right? Like it just seems the most likely betting probability here. So maybe they're bracing themselves for strong, sharp action on the under, which would indicate that it's more likely going to be a Pelicans cover. So over 220 to OU from the total from 220 to 218, and incentivizing the under. I don't know. It's a little bit with minus 103. This is interesting in a reverse line movement.
And then we've got Trailblazers taking on the Sacramento Kings. 945 bets so far on this late game. Blazers opened as 4-point favorites on the road. However, they've been bet down to 3.5-point favorites, and that is most likely because the Kings have received 88% of the money against the spread. And then when we take a look at the money line, also exposure on the Kings money line opening at plus 153, bet down to plus 147. So we would think normally they'd want to receive about 40% of the bets there to be like at equilibrium for the books, but they have received 52% of the money on the money line. So books are taking exposure on the Kings. They have moved that line just a bit, but there still is exposure on the Kings side, trying to incentivize people to take the Blazers at a better price.
Good example would be if the Kings if this line doesn't like goes down, you'll know, like you can kind of use like extrapolation to figure out who's overvalued and undervalued in each spot here. And there's a chance here that this is just they open with a bad line on the Kings, and perhaps because there is a lot of like early interest, and I don't think the Kings are, you know what I mean? Like it's not I have a feeling they're more of a pro team than a Joe team, if anything. And the Trailblazers are a little bit more popular. Again, these are just really, really speculating theories, but this does make sense. These are lateral movements, and I think they want you to bet the Blazers more or less, so they have to incentivize it a bit more. I think this market's going to move a little bit more, but curious to wait and see.
Yeah, Sacramento, they have been the 25th most bet team percentage-wise. They've been the number 11 team bet-wise, but you and I went over those analytics about how West Coast teams just seem to get bet more because there's less games in the evening, so those games tend to be bet more by all the early bettors jumping on only You can see it here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, anywhere from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, only the 2 evening games. So those games tend to get focused on just a little bit more. The OU for this game, it opened at 236. It's been bet up to 237. 59% of bettors and 76% of the money has helped push this line up 1 point, Fat Guy.
Yeah, that is, I guess it does make sense here. I'm just really, I really wish we had a nice split between the 945 to get a better idea. I mean, if we had the handle for each market and the split, that would make things really easy as far as being profitable in the coming year. But this is standard fare though, except it's like you're sacrificing 4 points of juice though from 236 to 237. So I mean, it's like a half point move kind of, and I'm starting to wonder why don't they do half points more. I guess they want. There's got to be a reason because we haven't seen too many half point moves in doing this, and maybe because there's a free roll kind of where you tie one number and then you win the rest kind of, like maybe that's where it is and that's why they're doing it this way. So rather than making it like 236.5 at minus 105 or or minus 105, let's say they go 237 minus 102. I mean, that's just a theory as well, because I'm noticing that there isn't too many half numbers. They're mostly whole numbers, especially today, even 4 for 4. So something to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, this next, I'm going to give you guys one more tidbit before we sign off. And this isn't something that you guys should be using to make a for sure bet, but it's just interesting to note that if the OU's at 237, only 25% of games have finished with more than 238 points or more. So it's just something to keep in your mind that it's not impossible for this to happen, but 75% of games have been less than that. But like you see, most of these other games, the OU is set much lower than this 237. So it's not quite like an equal picture or a good way to decide on your bets, but I figured it's just a nice little tidbit I'd throw in. But that's it for the January 13th, 2021 NBA betting market. Fat Guy, you got anything else to add? I think not. So you guys have a good day. Good luck on your January 13 wagers.